and Allah knows best. So this hadith mentions, now does this hadith mention the Mahdi, yes or no? Where? But does this hadith mention the Mahdi? No, it does not. But other ahadith mention that the Mahdi will be the one that will be there when the news comes that the Dajjal is around. So it appears that this big war that is being referenced is a war that the Mahdi will participate in, even though he's not mentioned in this one, right? So it is a war between Ar-Rum and between the Muslims. It is a massive war. Now, many have said this hadith is a reference to the Armageddon. And it could be true. Because here's the point. Is the Armageddon one battle or is it a series of battles? It goes back. If it's only one battle, then in all likelihood that will be Dajjal and Isa ibn Maryam. But if it is a series of major battles, then it makes sense that this hadith in fact is one of those big battles of the Armageddon. Allah knows best. The next hadith we'll mention, which is a very cryptic one, and it has been used by the terrorist group known as the Islamic State as their basis. We don't agree with this group, and I have very publicly criticized them, and all you need to do is look at how much damage they have done a lot of times. And by the way, I gave many lectures about this. Obviously I'm new to the community still, but you will know inshallah when we go on. SubhanAllah, look at what the Prophet ﷺ said about the Kharijites, the Khawarij. He said, their speech is beautiful, but their actions are deadly. Their speech sounds good. It is sweet, but what they do is evil. And this is exactly what these groups, all of them. If you just listen to snippets, oh, we will re-establish Allah's command and we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Then you look at what they do and the number of Muslims that they have killed and their tactics and you realize these are exactly the Khawarij, like the Prophet ﷺ said. Read the descriptions of the Kharijites. Look at what they did to the Sahaba. Look at their philosophy and attitude. And wallahi, you will see all of these groups. They might speak that which sounds like honey, but in reality, their harm is much worse than even the harm that non-Muslims do. And this is the reality that we see with our own eyes. So this group known as the so-called Islamic State, which is now on its last legs and it will inshallah be completely eliminated. This group used the hadith I'm about to quote you as its basis, as one of its main bases. And it is authentic hadith, and it is the hadith in Sahih Muslim. Abu Hurairah narrated that the judgment will not come until a room will come out to fight you at a place called A'maq or Dabiq. Now, Dabiq is, and A'maq is close to it. Dabiq is a city in Syria. And the so-called Islamic State took it as its capital. And they intentionally fought to get a small city, a very mid-sized or small-sized city. They wanted to capture that city. Why? Because it's mentioned in this hadith. And we had said a few weeks ago that it is not allowed to do what? Do you remember? I mentioned this very clearly. It is not allowed to do what? Write a screenplay from the hadith. We don't write a Hollywood drama from the hadith. It happens, it will happen. We do not extract a drama and enact it. We've seen what happened throughout history when people have attempted to do that. No, we don't do that. It happens, it will happen. But you don't think you are the one who's going to go do that. We have seen time and time again, people have attempted to do that and it has failed miserably. And one of the most important examples, this is another example of ISIS and Dabiq and whatnot. Another example we mentioned is Juhayman and his takeover of the Kaaba, and he thought he would enact all of the hadith that are mentioned, but he couldn't, because again you have to pick and choose, just like over here. And anyway, so the hadith goes on, that the Romans will come and fight you at a land called Dabiq. And the best of the people of earth from the city of Medina will leave Medina and fight against them. When they are getting ready for war, lining up for war, listen to this, very cryptic. The Romans will say to the Muslims, leave us with the group amongst you who have forsaken their religion. We want to fight them. I'll explain. The Muslims will say, La wallahi, we will never leave our brethren and will never abandon them to you. I'll finish the hadith and then explain. So the battle will rage on. The battle will rage on. 1/3 of the Muslims will retreat out of cowardice, and Allah will never forgive them. When the battle gets tough, they will flee, and the Prophet ﷺ said they will never be forgiven. 1/3 will be killed, and they will be the best of shuhada. They stood their ground, they died martyrs, and they will be the best of shuhada. And 1/3 will conquer, 1/3 will win, and they will not be tested. Maybe the test of the grave, maybe the test of the akhirah. They will not be tested. Allah will bless them, and they will not be tested. And they, meaning that 1/3, will then conquer Constantinople. Again, we'll explain this in a while. It's a long hadith. When they will be dividing their ghanima, after they've hung their swords on the trees to be oiled, then they will hear Shaitan cry out that Dajjal has appeared amongst your children. Thinking it to be true, they will march to fight the Dajjal, but they will find it to be a lie, and they will reach Bilad al-Sham, Syria, and when they have lined up to pray Fajr, that is when Isa ibn Maryam will come down after the Dajjal has actually come, and he will then lead the Muslims in war and battle. And when Aduwallah, the Dajjal, sees Isa ibn Maryam, he will melt like salt is dissolved in water. And the Prophet ﷺ said, if he were to be left in that state, he would die, but Isa will kill him, and the people will see the blood of the blood of Dajjal on the weapon of Isa. End hadith. Now, again, this hadith is very, very cryptic. It mentions many things. First and foremost, it also reiterates the previous concept of a massive war between the Romans and the Muslims. Now, in this hadith, it mentions 1/3 only will die, whereas the previous hadith mentions 99% will die. As I said, it appears there will be multiple battles, not just one. And in some of them 99%, and in some of them 1/3. This hadith mentions that this army will conquer Constantinople, whereas the previous hadith does not mention that. So maybe there are multiple wars going on in the world, and the Dajjal's announcement will take place in all of them. Shaitan's going to frighten the Muslims. Dajjal is here. They're going to be expecting Dajjal because they're seeing the hadith take place. So Shaitan will use it as a tactic. So maybe multiple groups will run back to Bilad al-Sham, and there they will be with the Mahdi, and the Mahdi will then be leading them in Salah, and Dajjal will actually have come at that point in time, and then Isa will come down, as we had mentioned. Another hadith that mentions all of these as well is that the Prophet ﷺ said, the fortress of Muslims on the day of the Malhama, this is where it is mentioned, the Armageddon, the Malhama, will be Ghuta, which is a city near Damashq, one of the best cities in Ash-Sham. This hadith is in Abu Dawood, it is authentic. 3 things are mentioned: Ghuta, Damashq, and Bilad al-Sham. Ghuta is a small city, it is still inhabited to this day, and it is maybe an hour or so outside of Damascus, or I don't know exact timing, but maybe a Syrian brother can tell me, but it's not far from Damascus. When the Prophet ﷺ said this hadith, Damashq, Ghuta, and Bilad al-Sham were the heartland of the Christian Byzantine Empire. This is like somebody saying, oh, Texas, California, these are not lands that belong to Islam. But the Prophet ﷺ predicted that Damashq and Ghuta will be a part of the Ummah. And that when the great Armageddon takes place, I'm translating Malhama as Armageddon. When the great Malhama takes place, the fortress, the base, the camp of the believers will be where? It will be in Ghuta. It will be in the city of Ghuta in Bilad al-Sham. And of course the concept of Bilad al-Sham is mentioned many times in the hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said, hadith is in Mustadrak al-Hakim, is authentic, when the fitan occur, Iman will be in Bilad al-Sham. When the fitan take place, when the big civil wars, Iman will be in Bilad al-Sham. Now let's pause for a while and look at these hadith and try to extract a series of incidents. What can we extract from all of this? So, first and foremost, realize that Bilad al-Sham doesn't just mean Syria. Bilad al-Sham in classical Arabic, pre-partition, when I say partition, don't think 1947, that's the partition of India, Pakistan and whatnot. I mean pre-partition, the Sykes-Picot Agreement. The Sykes-Picot Agreement in 1917, and then the Treaty of Versailles in 1919, which then enacted it. Before the partition of the Muslim Ummah, before England and France decided to carve up the Ummah and hand gifts out to the victors, and they took up the Ottoman Empire,